What happens when Hollywood's toughest fighter walks straight into a trap? Not in a boxing ring this time, but in the hot seat of daytime TV. When Sylvester Stallone stepped onto The View, the audience expected laughs, movie talk, and a charming chat. Instead, they got verbal jabs sharper than a left hook and an on-air showdown no one saw coming. This wasn't just an interview. It was an ambush dressed up as friendly conversation. Respect turned into ridicule. Questions turned into accusations. And Stallone? He stood tall, refusing to crumble, until finally he delivered a knockout line that left the room stunned. Picture it, the studio buzzing louder than usual, producers darting around, audience members leaning forward with eager eyes. Everyone was waiting for the man himself, Sylvester Stallone. Rocky. Rambo. Hollywood's Iron Man of grit and glory, now 77 years old, but still radiating the energy of a fighter ready to go 10 rounds. As the cameras rolled, Stallone made his entrance tailored gray suit, broad shoulders, that half smile that says, "I've been through it all, and I'm still standing." The applause was warm, almost too warm, but beneath it, something felt off. Years in Hollywood had sharpened his instincts, and his gut told him this wasn't going to be a love fest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Joy Behar purred, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "please welcome the man who's been punching his way into our hearts since the 70 seconds, Sylvester Stallone." Stallone grinned, that gravelly voice filling the room. "Thanks for having me," he said, calm, steady, unshaken. He greeted the panel with polite nods. But then he caught it, the look in Joy's eyes. That sly glimmer, the one that warned him. "This isn't about your movie. This is about you." Joy leaned forward, smirk loaded like a weapon. "So, Sly, mind if I call you Sly? You've been making these big, loud, testosterone-fueled movies for, what, 50 years now? Don't you ever wonder if maybe the world's moved on from all that macho stuff?" The audience chuckled awkwardly. A nervous laugh, the kind people give when they know something's about to explode. Stallone chuckled too, but behind that smile, his eyes narrowed. This wasn't a question. It was a jab. "Well, Joy," he said smoothly, crossing one leg over the other, his posture calm but firm. "The world might move fast, but there's always room for stories about resilience, about fighting for something you believe in. That's what my movies are about." The audience perked up. A solid answer. But Joy? She wasn't done swinging. She tilted her head, lips curled. "Fighting, sure. But aren't you worried your films glorify violence? That they give young men the idea they can just punch their way out of problems?" A gasp rippled through the room. Stallone clasped his hands together, his tone calm but his gaze razor-sharp. "Rocky didn't win because he threw punches, Joy. He won because he got back up every time he was knocked down. That's not about violence, that's about spirit." And then another host piled on. Sonny Hostin leaned forward, her voice dripping with doubt. "But Sylvester, isn't it all just a little dated? The hyper-masculine, muscle-bound hero thing? Maybe today's audiences want something, I don't know, more sophisticated?" The word sophisticated hung in the air like an insult. Stallone repeated it softly, almost tasting it. "More sophisticated." His jaw tightened, his smile stayed. And then he fired back. "There's nothing more sophisticated than the human will to overcome." The crowd erupted. But Joy? She leaned back, unimpressed, going for the jugular. "Come on, Sly. Aren't you just playing the same guy over and over? Rocky, Rambo, Barney Ross, different costumes, same angry fists." The jab landed. The air froze. And that's when Stallone decided it was time to stop dodging. It was time to throw a punch of his own. That jab landed harder than it sounded. Stallone uncrossed his legs, leaning forward, hands pressed firmly on his knees. His voice dropped low, steady, but with steel behind it. "I've told stories about underdogs, soldiers, fathers, men standing at the edge of their limits. If they all share grit, it's because grit is universal." The audience clapped, but it was cautious, almost nervous. Then, Joy waved her hand dismissively, her smirk curling into something sharper. "Oh, please, Sly, don't make it sound like Shakespeare. You're throwing punches, blowing things up. You're just a good-looking guy who lucked into one big movie and kept coasting." The other hosts shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting at each other. The remark sucked the air out of the room. But Stallone's response? Too calm. "You're entitled to your opinion, Joy," he said slowly, his eyes locked on hers. "But I worked for every inch of my career. Nobody handed me anything. I wrote Rocky when I had nothing, and it changed my life because I refused to quit. Instead of backing down." Joy doubled down. Yeah, we've heard the bus station story," she scoffed. "But come on, it's been decades. Maybe it's time to hang up the gloves and stop pretending these movies are anything more than cashing in on nostalgia." The words hit like a low blow. Stallone didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded tight, his silence louder than any rebuttal. But the studio felt it, the storm brewing behind that calm facade. Everyone knew, when it broke, it would break hard. By the time cameras rolled again after commercial break, the tension was suffocating. Stallone sat poised, hands clasped, jawline carved from stone, his eyes dark, sharp, unblinking, never left Joy. And Joy? She was grinning now. She smelled blood in the water, and she wanted her knockout moment. "So, Sly," she purred, flipping through her notes with fake casualness. "Let's talk about your acting. Do you even consider yourself an actor, or are you just playing yourself over and over again?" The audience gasped. Stallone raised one eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Well, Joy," he replied coolly, "I've been nominated for Oscars. I've written, directed, produced, starred. That usually counts as acting in most circles." But Joy wasn't letting go. She chuckled, cold, sharp, dismissive. "Oh, please. That first nomination was back in 1976. You were young, hungry. But now? Be honest, you're just milking the same character over and over because it's safe. Rocky, Rambo, whatever muscle-bound guy comes next. You don't actually challenge yourself, do you?" The studio rippled with murmurs. Some gasped. Others shook their heads. The tension was unbearable. Stallone shifted, leaning forward, his voice low and deliberate like a fighter measuring his counterpunch. "Every film I make is a challenge, physically, emotionally. You don't know what it takes to carry a story, to stand there and give everything you've got to make something that moves people. But go ahead, Joy. Tell me what my job island. You seem to know it better than I do." The crowd erupted, cheers, claps, shouts. But before the fire could spread further, Whoopi finally jumped in, her voice a soft lifeline cutting through the storm. "Maybe," she said gently, "we can talk about the new movie, Sly. Tell us." Whoopi tried to steer things back to neutral. "So, Sly, tell us what inspired the new movie." But Joy cut her off sharp, ruthless. "Oh no, Whoopi. Let's not let him off that easy. Let's really get into it." She leaned forward, eyes narrowing like a predator circling prey. "What's it like knowing the only reason people still pay to see you is because they feel sorry for you? That they're clinging to nostalgia because the real Sylvester Stallone, the fighter, the icon is long gone? What's it like knowing your best work was 50 years ago?" The words landed like a gut punch. The audience gasped. Even the producers shifted uncomfortably behind the cameras. For a long, chilling moment, Stallone said nothing. His hands tightened on his knees, his jaw clenched. Then he let out a short, sharp laugh, one that carried no humor. "You know what, Joy?" he said finally, his voice low, dangerous. "You've got guts. I'll give you that. But you've got no idea what you're talking about. You think just because you've got a camera and an audience, you can sit there and tear people apart. People who've built something. People who've worked their whole lives to create something meaningful. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me." Joy rolled her eyes, scoffing. "Oh, sure, Sly. Poor little underdog. Still fighting the good fight, huh? Still trying to prove you're more than a pair of biceps? But let me tell you something, nobody buys it anymore. The world's moved on. You're a relic." At that word, Stallone's entire posture shifted. He straightened in his chair, shoulders squared, his presence suddenly towering over the table. His voice, though calm, cut through the studio like steel. "A relic," he repeated. "You think because the world changes, everything that came before means nothing? You think because people want something new, the old stories stop mattering? Those stories still inspire people. Joy, they still matter. And I still matter whether you like it or not." The audience clapped nervously, unsure whether to cheer or hold their breath. That's when Sunny Hostin tried to soften the blow, her voice tentative. I think what Joy's saying, and I could be wrong, is maybe it's time for new voices to step forward. And for legends like yourself, to step aside. Stallone turned his gaze on her. Cold, unblinking. She visibly flinched under the weight of it. I don't take up space that isn't mine, he said firmly. There's room for everyone if they're willing to fight for it. I fought for mine. Nobody handed me a damn thing. And I'm not going to apologize for still being here. The audience erupted, half cheers, half gasps. Joy only laughed sharp, mocking, cutting. Oh, we know you fought. You've told that sob story so many times it's practically a bedtime tale by now. But you know what I think? I think you're terrified of letting go, of fading away, of becoming irrelevant. That's why you keep churning out the same old junk. It's sad, really. The room shifted uncomfortably. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Even the producers behind the cameras exchanged nervous glances. But Stallone? He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He simply stared at Joy, his silence heavier than thunder. Then he leaned forward, his massive hands folded together, his voice a low growl that somehow filled the entire studio. You want to talk about sad, Joy? Sad is sitting here every day, tearing down people who are actually out there doing something. People who are out there living. You call it journalism. You call it holding people accountable? Stallone's voice cut like steel. What you do isn't accountability. Joy, it's bitterness. It's jealousy dressed up as insight. You've built your career out of mocking others. Congratulations, Joy's face flushed crimson, but she hid it behind that cold, predator's smile. Oh, look at the tough guy getting sensitive. Did I strike a nerve, Sly? Does the truth hurt? Stallone didn't flinch, didn't blink. His eyes locked on hers, dark, steady, unshakable. Then he said it, low, razor sharp. Truth? You wouldn't recognize the truth if it sat in this chair and shook your hand. The audience exploded, half applause, half nervous laughter. The air was electric, like a storm about to break wide open. And Stallone? He wasn't about to let Joy land the final punch. Not yet. When the cameras came back from another break, the silence was deafening. No coughs, no whispers. Even the rowdy studio audience sat frozen, eyes glued to the simmering standoff between Stallone and Joy Behar. Joy shuffled her papers, a nervous tick disguised as composure, then leaned forward with that smile again, the kind that looked more like a wolf baring its teeth. So, Sylvester, she cooed, her voice dripping with venom. Before the break you accused me of… what was it? Bitterness? Jealousy? I suppose that's easier for you to believe than facing the fact that maybe, just maybe, your movies really are as shallow as people say. The jab landed, but Stallone didn't flinch. His massive frame sat rigid, coiled with controlled tension. His lips twitched before he spoke, measured and deliberate. My movies, he said slowly, are about giving people hope, something to hold on to when life is beating them down. If you can't see that, Joy, that's not my problem. That's yours. But Joy wasn't finished. Not even close. She pressed forward, her words sharpened like daggers. Hope? She scoffed. Come on, Sly. Your movies are about sweaty men beating each other bloody while a flag waves in the background. You've spent 50 years teaching boys that a clenched fist is the answer to every problem. And you call that hope? The words lingered like smoke in the air. Even Whoopi, usually quick to diffuse, sat frozen, lips pressed in a hard, uneasy line. Stallone exhaled slowly through his nose. The veins in his forearms bulged as his fists tightened together. Then his voice came deep, steady, but burning with fire. You know what, Joy? He said. When you've stood in my shoes, when you've faced rejection after rejection, when you've written your own script by hand because nobody believed in you, when you've had to sell your dog just to buy food, and then fought your way back, then maybe, just maybe, you can sit there and judge me. Until then, you're just another voice in the cheap seats. The audience erupted, cheers, applause, shouts. Stallone's words hung heavy, a fighter's punch delivered with precision. But Joy wasn't letting the moment slip. She raised her hand, waving the applause away with sarcasm dripping from every word. Oh yes, she sneered. The I sold my dog story. We've all heard it, Sly. It's practically part of your brand now. The studio froze, then it happened. Joy dropped a bomb that no one saw coming. But here's the thing, Sylvester, she snapped, her smile sharpened into a dagger. One sad story from 50 years ago doesn't excuse a lifetime of glorifying violence and mediocrity. The crowd gasped. That word mediocrity. It hit Stallone like a sucker punch to the ribs. You could see it in his eyes, hurt flashing, then burning into fire. Glorifying mediocrity. He repeated slowly, his voice low, steady, dangerous. You think it's mediocrity? To fight for every inch? To stand up when everyone tells you to stay down? To create something that outlives you, something that inspires millions of people who've been told they're not good enough? That's not mediocrity, Joy. That's called making a difference. The room fell silent. But Joy? Oh, she wasn't done yet. She leaned forward, her smile gone, her tone razor-sharp. And yet, she hissed, what do you really have to show for it? A bunch of meathead fans who think they're Rocky? A string of sequels nobody asked for? A legacy of broken noses and bruised egos? The audience murmured nervously. The co-hosts shifted in their seats. They knew this was spiraling into dangerous territory. But Joy pressed harder. You know what I see when I look at you, Sylvester? Her voice rose like a blade cutting through the air. I see a man who got lucky once, and has been, riding that one lucky punch ever since. You're not a fighter. You're a fraud. A mascot for outdated masculinity. That word joke. It didn't just land. It detonated like a grenade in the studio. For the first time since sitting down, Stallone's composure cracked. He leaned forward, eyes blazing, locked onto hers like a predator. His voice was quiet, but it carried across every inch of the stage. You want to call me a joke? He asked. Fine. Call me whatever makes you feel better about yourself. But let me tell you something, Joy. The only joke here is the idea that you think you're a journalist. You're not. You're a heckler with a camera. The audience gasped again, louder this time. Joy's face turned crimson, but Stallone wasn't finished. His words rolled out like thunder. You sit here every day tearing down people who've actually accomplished something, who've actually built something. You mock. You belittle. You humiliate. And then you hide behind words like journalism and accountability. But you're not holding anyone accountable, you're just feeding on other people's pain. His breathing grew heavy, chest rising and falling like a fighter between rounds. But the fire in his eyes? It only burned hotter. You think you know me? You think you understand my life? You don't know the first damn thing about what it takes to keep getting back up after life knocks you down. All you know is how to sit here, safe behind your little desk, throwing stones at people who've actually lived. Joy opened her mouth to fire back, but her words died under the sheer weight of his booming voice. I've spent my life building people up, he thundered, giving them something to believe in. And all you've ever done is tear people down. You want to talk about legacy, Joy? That's yours. That's who you are, Stallone thundered, his words slicing through the air like a blade. A destroyer. The studio froze. For a heartbeat, even the cameras seemed unsure should they zoom in on Stallone's blazing glare or Joy's stunned face. Finally, Joy broke the silence, her voice shaky but dripping with defiance. If you can't handle a few tough questions, Sylvester, maybe you should stay off TV. Maybe you should just fade away quietly and stop embarrassing yourself. Ouch! The audience gasped, the insult hanging heavy in the air like smoke after an explosion. Stallone let out a short, humorless laugh, low, sharp, and dangerous. He shook his head slowly. No, Joy, you don't get to tell me when I'm done. You don't get to decide when I stop fighting. And you sure as hell don't get to sit there and judge me like you're better than me. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper so sharp it cut deeper than a shout. You're not better than me, Joy. You're just louder. But loud doesn't make you right. The words hung there, heavy, final, like the toll of a bell. The air turned thick, unbreathable. Crew members froze in place, unsure if they should keep rolling or cut to commercial. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as though afraid to provoke the storm sitting across from Joy Behar. Stallone sat motionless, his massive hands clasped, knuckles white, eyes blazing like fire through glass. Joy leaned back in her chair, lips curling into a smug little smile. "Well," she said, her tone dripping with mock pity, "I guess we learned today that Rocky can take a few punches in the ring, but he sure can't handle a few tough questions on TV." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some gasping, others shaking their heads. But Stallone didn't flinch this time. Instead, he calmly unhooked his microphone with deliberate, almost theatrical precision. He placed it gently on the table, like a man placing down his gloves before the final round. "You know," he said, voice low but steady, "I came here today, thinking this was going to be a conversation about my work, my career, my journey. I thought maybe we'd talk about what it means to spend 50 years in this business, what it takes to survive in a world that eats you alive if you let it." Joy rolled her eyes and cut him off with a scoff. "Oh, please. Spare us the martyr act. You're not some poor underdog anymore, Sylvester. You're a rich man clinging to a fairy tale that stopped being inspiring decades ago." That was it, the breaking point. Stallone slowly stood up. The red leather chair groaned under his weight. He adjusted his jacket, straightened his shoulders, and fixed Joy with a stare so intense it seemed to pierce straight through her and into the back row of the audience. He growled, his voice now rising to fill every corner of the room. "Don't know a damn thing about inspiring anyone. You don't know a damn thing about struggle, about sacrifice, about getting back up when life beats you down." He jabbed a finger toward her, his fury finally unleashed. "All you know is how to sit there, on your little throne of cynicism, tearing other people apart because you don't have the guts to create anything yourself." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but he cut her off with a sharp slash of his hand. "No," Stallone roared. "You've had your turn. You've spent this entire show mocking me, mocking my work, mocking my fans, and mocking the very people I've dedicated my life to inspiring." The crowd went silent, everyone waiting, breathless, for the next move. "You call that journalism? You think that makes you better than me? Makes you smarter? Makes you right?" Stallone demanded, stepping closer to the table, his presence magnetic, towering. The studio lights seemed to dim, the air itself turning ice cold. "You want to know what you really are, Joy?" His voice dropped to a lethal whisper that still carried to anyone, every corner of the set. Joy swallowed but didn't answer. "You're not a journalist. You're not a critic. You're not even a host. You're a vulture. You feed on other people's pain. You tear down everything good and noble just so you can feel important. But all you really are is small." The silence was suffocating. Even the co-hosts sat frozen, hands clamped tight in their laps, eyes wide. "I'm not here because I care what you think of me," Stallone continued, his words slicing through the air like blades. "I'm here because I respect the audience, the people watching at home. The ones who told me my stories gave them hope, who said my movies inspired them to keep fighting. That's who I work for. Not you." Joy's face was crimson now, but her trembling hands betrayed her mask of control. "You sit here pretending to be the voice of the people, but you don't even listen to them. All you care about is being louder than everyone else so you can hear yourself talk. But your words, they're empty. They mean nothing." He reached down, grabbed the microphone he'd set on the table, and dropped it again with a sharp clack that echoed through the studio. "This interview," he declared, "is over." The words hit like a gavel. Stallone straightened his jacket, turned on his heel, and began walking toward the studio doors. But just before he reached them, he stopped, turned back, and delivered one final devastating blow. "You call what you do journalism? You call this truth? Let me tell you what this is. It's a cheap circus full of clowns who don't even realize the joke is on them. You've spent your life tearing down people like me because it distracts you from what you see in the mirror. And what you see in the mirror," he locked eyes with Joy, who now looked genuinely shaken, "is nothing." Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. His footsteps echoed across the floor, deafening in the most. Silence. The cameras kept rolling. Joy sat frozen, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. The other co-hosts avoided her gaze. The audience was stunned, some in awe, some uncomfortable, some breaking into hesitant applause. And somewhere beyond the lights, beyond the cameras, Sylvester Stallone disappeared into the hallway, leaving behind a studio filled with silence, shattered egos, and the unmistakable sense that they had just witnessed something monumental. So now we have to ask, what did you think of this explosive confrontation? Was Stallone justified in finally speaking his mind and walking out? Or did Joy's tough questions simply strike too close to home? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more unbelievable stories just like this one.